Still here at day three of TIE Global Summit 2020, another session, and this one talks about future of transportation. I have Asrit from Hooper Labs, who will now introduce the moderator. Over to you, Asrit.
Hi, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Ashit Krishna. I work with Hooper Labs. In today's panel, The Future of Transportation, we're going to be looking at the innovation in the automobile and transport space, especially with the advent of new technologies such as AI and 5G, because we're truly on our way to an exceptionally interconnected world with automated, intelligent vehicles all around us. Today, we have a fantastic panel lined up, and it is my genuine pleasure to introduce Mr. Sudhindra Kaushik, a man of many talents. He's currently the co-founder and chief innovator at Prasu, which is a firm that consults at innovation and IP, focusing in the automotive and mobility domains. Mr. Sudhindra, this promises to be an excellent session, and I really look forward to watching from the audience. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ashit. It's a pleasure to be sharing some thoughts today with some very extremely smart, knowledgeable, and passionate people. I have with me two very good people that I know personally who actually have a lot of understanding of this space. So topic is, of course, future of transport, and transport is many things today. It is to do with people, it to do with goods, perhaps transport is moving anything to everything. So before I go anything further, I would like to share my colleagues and friends. I have Mr. Brian, who actually I should thank him specially because he's actually on vacation in Australia, and he was kind enough to join us today during his vacation. Brian is Vice President of Engineering and Operations at General Motors. He is basically based out of South Korea. Like I said, he's on vacation in Australia, but thank you so much, Brian, for joining. And I have with me Sridhar Rao. Thank you, Brian. I have with me Mr. Sridhar Rao, who is Division Head for e-mobility. So a lot of things around electrification will be clarified by Sridhar. He works at ZF India Technology Center in Hyderabad. So thank you, Sridhar. Welcome to the panel. The format will be, I'll just say a few things to open the topic, and I'll hand over to each of you to say a few words from your perspective. And then after that, we go into the Q&A mode. I'll also have something to share now. So if the organizers can help me share my screen. Yeah, I just happened to bounce upon this quote by a gentleman called Ian Pearson, who's supposed to be a very well-known futurist. So his accuracy of future predictions are hovering around the 85% mark. So perhaps we should take seriously what he says. So in 2015, apparently he said that in the next 10 years, you will have driverless vehicles will be very ubiquitous in 10 years. So he said that in 2015, and now we are in 2020. So in 5 years, we will have ubiquitous driverless vehicles around us. Well, it's a question that we'll figure out in the next 30 minutes or so. So, but nevertheless, what do we see around us today is another complex situation, which apparently this guy, Anthony Baudon, said, when dealing with complex transportation issues, the best thing to do is to pull up the cold beer and let somebody else figure it out. I think some of you might be in different parts of the world and having hopefully a glass of beer in your hand. Just relax and have a listen to the conversation. Would be happy to hear your thoughts as well. So when I look at transportation and future, there is a lot of talks about inefficiencies costing billions of dollars. Then we talk about pollution, the negative impact on environment. Then you have zero emission. Different companies have different zeros, right? Some have zero emissions, zero accidents. The third zero could be zero stress. It could be zero ownership, maybe a different zero altogether. But all this also has a different impact on what we actually see happening. This was mesmerizing to see when I picked up this picture of the Vera truck. It doesn't look like anything real, but it is real. It's a real truck that drove this thing. And I'm sure I'll pick Brian's brain on this stuff as well. And then when I look at the bus of Mercedes, I mean, it's really futuristic, and maybe it looks like a computer-generated graphic to some extent. Or the famous EHang AAV, autonomous aerial vehicle. So there are two kinds of AAV, as you might know, which carries people, and that's the one which is more interesting, which looks like this. 1.77 meters of aircraft height, and so 220 kgs of payload, maybe typical 2-3 people a normal weight, and the range of 35 kilometers with this, 130 kilometers max speed. I think very, very interesting and realistic, and they will perhaps be live in 2 years according to them. And for those more adventurous, we have this hover bike, and this is a real guy doing the real stuff. And they also are taking booking if you go to hoversurf.com. So a lot of things happening around this. So maybe I'll just, before we get into the Q&A, I will request Brian to share his thoughts and opinions on this topic, and then we take it from there. Over to you, Brian.
Thanks, Kaushik, and good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to everyone that's dialed into this conference today. I know this is a very hot topic. Many of you have probably been to other conferences before talking about, what is the future of mobility, what's going to be happening, and you've heard lots of things. What we rarely hear and what I've rarely heard people talk about is, why? Why now? Why is everyone all of a sudden talking about the future of mobility? Why is it a sexy thing to talk about these days? We've had electric cars since the early 1900s, so that's not a big deal. And we've been talking about autonomous forever, so why now? Let me make it very personal for you, because this is something that is very personal to me. What's driving the future of mobility is companies, countries, governments, and national bodies are realizing just how much trouble we are having right now with the environment. And what used to be thought as, well, it's going to be someone else's problem to deal with in the future and it's a long way off, is now becoming reality. So I want to give you a little bit of information that doesn't always get publicized the way I think it should. You may be aware of the Paris Accord. The Paris Accord talked about what all the countries and the major countries would do. They would come together and they would have some strategies and what they would believe would be a target that was worth achieving to help the current environment and help future generations. What they agreed to was to maintain a temperature of 1.5 degrees global warming above the normal temperature. What is interesting about that is that everyone's already given up on the Paris Accord from a couple of years ago when we agreed that 1.5 degrees increase would be a good number. We're already on our way to 1.7 degrees, in fact. And by the middle of this century, which is not that far away, we're on track to hit over 2 degrees average temperature. And I can hear everyone sitting there going, yeah, but what's the big deal? It's only 2 degrees. I won't go into all the information for you, but I will tell you there is some staggering facts around the amount of issues that will cause with coastal flooding, as what used to be a once in 100 years ice melting cap for off the North Atlantic will now be once every 10 years. The amount of famine that will increase, we are going to see numbers going from several hundreds of thousands of economic refugees to now going to more than 400 million economic refugees as a direct impact of climate and climate change and global warming between now and the end of this century, which is not too far away. You add that into the scarcity of water, fresh water around large parts of the world. I will tell you, you will see the days where people go to war over water. And that's all at around 2 degrees. When you look at what that means, if we're talking about 2050, in order to have sustainability for our children and our grandchildren, we have to make rapid changes immediately. Let me tell you what it would mean for every industry and every transportation around the globe. If we all pooled our resources and our thoughts and our technology, and every country around the world switched completely to electrification or switched to fuel cells, non-polluting technologies, and we did that by 2030, so 10 years from now, we were still going to be at about 1.9 degrees global warming temperature. So what that tells you is we actually don't have a plan. And that to me is the most frightening part of all of this. And yes, transportation is one part of it, and there's lots of other elements as well that makes up global warming. But even if we change completely in the next 10 years, we already have a massive amount of work to do. So what's the future of mobility? Why is everyone talking about it now? Because people are realizing that we want to be responsible and don't want to be the people that have to tell our children that we made decisions that cause them grievance in the future, or their grandchildren or our grandchildren are going to suffer tremendously because of the decisions that we made and the legacies that we left for them. So as you look at that, companies all over the world right now are racing towards what is the future of mobility. And if you ask me, and I work for an automotive company and I'm very proud of the company I work for, you know that I work for General Motors. You'll have already seen that we're doing a lot of things. We've been very public in the technologies that we're employing. We've been very public of how quickly we're going to be moving to a complete electrified company in the near future. What you see, though, is transportation is going to be less about individuals and more around mass transits and getting large numbers of people to move efficiently with lots of last mile transportation options becoming available. So what's really interesting to me is not about cars and what the cars of the future are going to look like, because I think it's going to be very different. What I think is going to be very interesting is mobility is going to be around mass transit, and then lots of people for that last 1 mile of connectivity will have their own modes, and that might be autonomous. That might be actually e-bikes. It might be e-scooters. It could be, something as simple as we have different elevators or escalators for those last transits between some of the high rises. You look at all of that, and then you throw one more wrinkle into the equation, which we've all been living with this year, as is evident today even on this. We're all working from home. Most of us have been working from home for at least the last 6 to 9 months globally. The virus is not going away at the moment. And what's happened is the whole world has learned to now work from home. And so this whole concept of having to now travel to your place of work for business in the future has now got a whole new meaning. And so I think that has also now changed the future of mobility, where I see, and we're already seeing it, it's not about you going somewhere, it's about people or things coming to you. We're now becoming very comfortable with Amazons and all sorts of other companies having things brought to our doorstep to help us live, whether it be food, whether it be accessories, groceries, doesn't matter what it is. That is another level of personal mobility. It just happens to be that we're not moving, someone's bringing it to us. So drones, autonomous vehicles, whether it be autonomous trucks, autonomous, little mobile solutions where a truck will turn up to a whole subdivision or a whole building's infrastructure, and then you have little autonomous, call them little robots running around delivering baggage or parcels to people. That will be part of the mobility solution which we thought was something in the future. We're already seeing it right now as a result of COVID. So for me, that is what all industries are dealing with the future of mobility. Very different from what we even thought about 12 months ago.
Thanks, Ben. It's an excellent landscape. The contour that you gave really is wonderful. It actually is a cog in the wheel, if I may put it that way, because it's connecting to so many things in a domino effect. So wonderful. So we'll get back to some of the points you mentioned, Brian. So before that, maybe we can hear from Sridhar, your perspective on this topic. Sridhar, I'm not able to hear you. Probably you're on mute. I'm not sure. Perhaps the most used phrase in 2020. You're on mute.
Okay, the second most used phrase. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So thanks, Sudhindra, for this wonderful opportunity, and thank you, Brian, for letting us know what the landscape is all about. My name is Sridhar. I work for ZF. I'm responsible for Division E, which is basically e-mobility within ZF ITC. Now, according to us, I guess the future of mobility hinges around two aspects. Basically, one is electrification, the other one is digitalization. Yeah. And typically, when you talk about e-mobility, we always talk about range anxiety, we talk about infrastructure challenges, we talk about charging time challenges, etc. And typically, when you actually talk about digitalization, you talk about data monetization, IoT, big data, etc. Now, what if we thought, what if we actually bring this together, yeah, in an innovation platform and do something about it? And with ZF, we came up with something called an intelligent e-axle, which basically sits under your hood, and it actually connects to the cloud, and it actually shares information on a bidirectional way. So typically, it connects information about the driving behavior, the parking brake information, the undercurrent and over voltage sensors, monitors temperatures, and it also gives you some information about the motors on the inverters. Yeah. And with this data, which is basically available now, and it actually opens up a huge amount of business model for the ecosystem. Yeah. The OEMs can actually start looking at individual patterns and trying to derive something out of it. The fleet owners, for example, they can start looking at predictive maintenance, start detecting malfunctions much earlier. And similarly, the developers who are us basically sitting in ZF, we can actually start looking at how we can actually take the current challenges that we have today and make better electric drives, because optimization is not only in the battery, but it is also in the drive lines. Yeah. And also look at how the real traffic scenarios actually help us in optimizing all this up. If you look at rental companies, for example, you can look at pay per X modules, for example. Yeah. Now let's say that you have this data coming, and you can on a click of a button on a mobile, and you can actually ask for more torque. Yeah, you could probably get a Formula E feeling, for example, or you can look at having a torque on a very steep road, and you can actually get that extra boost that is coming from an electric motor. Yeah. And this is about digitalization. Similarly, for transportation in general, I think ZF is one of the pioneers in some of these e-mobility products. It could be C-Tracks, X-Tracks for trucks, for example, or it could be the PHEV systems for the pass cars, for example. Yeah. So we are there. We are supporting our OEMs in helping them to take it to the future mobility. And like rightly Brian said, try to be carbon neutral by 2050. Yeah. Thank you. Over to you, Sidnira.
Excellent, thank you. So we have a depth and breadth of a topic coming across very quickly. So maybe I'll pick on one of the key points that you mentioned, Brian, which is the twist in the tail with respect to the pandemic. So just as we saw the shared mobility picking up globally, everybody trying to get comfortable and getting used to have shared mobility. The pandemic has actually put brakes on it, right? It has actually made people wonder whether they would anytime soon go back to shared mobility. And on the other side, we have reports that the used vehicles, or the market for the used vehicles is going up. So do you think, Brian, this is a delay of what was bound to happen in the future of, or in the plans of the transportation world, or is it going to be making a dent in the plans that we had as responsible companies like General Motors and stuff like that?
Good question. Look, I'll give you my opinion based on what I'm seeing. I wouldn't say that it's caused a delay or a dent. What I would say, it's caused an opportunity that was previously not foreseen. Everyone was very, very focused on, what shared mobility should be, what e-mobility should be, different forms of it. None of us, I don't think any of us, thought for 1 second that most of the globe in the span of a couple of months would be able to run business completely from home. And none of us were ever in a position to even test it. And this caused us to test it. And you're either surviving and thriving, or you're dead. This whole pandemic has caused industries that were quite stable to become highly unstable. Just look at what's happened to the aircraft industry right now and the impact that is happening globally, and then how that follows on down all of the secondary, third, fourth levels within the industry. But then there's other industries that, as a result of this, have now flourished and have actually just been multiplying at a frightening rate, because everyone's now gotten used to doing something different. And what's interesting is India, and Kaushik, I was living there for a long time. India was very comfortable having big baskets and those sorts of companies bringing food to your door, and bringing groceries, and then that expanded to all sorts of other things, bringing gas bottles, bringing water bottles, etc. I would say that India was leading the world in those home delivery services. This has now forced the rest of the globe now to do the same thing. So the amount of businesses that have sprung up through the course of this pandemic with delivery services to get to where they're going, and it could be vans, small vans. The sale of small vans has gone through the roof as people are now delivering groceries, pizzas, water, gas, you name it, whatever they're delivering. The little vans are now on the rise. If you look at even bicycles, certain areas of major cities, the amount of couriers on bicycles, e-bikes, have gone through the roof because it's too hard to navigate with cars and vans. So e-bikes, that business has literally gone through, tenfold increase in the last 6 months. So that was an unknown or untapped potential. So I don't think it was a delay. I think nothing stopped as a result of the pandemic with technology. It's moving, in fact, even faster. We're all exploring different things. But then there's been these surprises along the way that's just added to the mix of what mobility will be like. So I find it fascinating that this has happened. I know others would not agree with me, and it's been a real stretch for all of us and our businesses and our cash flow this year. But out of that will come new technologies that were probably not even thought of.
Yeah, I can relate to what you're saying. So, question on electrification, Sridhar. So there is always this debate: is electrification really clean? And it, of course, depends on where the source of the electrification is, and etc. And I've also been involved with some classically non-road vehicles, right? Off-road vehicles like lifters and forklifters and so on. Most of them, close to 80%, are electric already. So what is your take on this debate about opportunities for clean electrification, so to say?
So, Sudhindra, thanks for the question. Pretty interesting. If you look at the EU requirements that has come up, I think Brian already covered it in his opening speech. Yeah, the commercial vehicle CO2 fleet reduction is supposed to be 15% lesser in 2025 and about 30% lesser by 2030. Yeah. And this becomes a big opportunity for tier ones like ZF, which is already a leading, manufacturer of electric component solutions in place. Yeah, and typically, if you look at our solutions, we have something like C-Trax, which is basically a product that is already in mass production today, which actually is, a complete e-axle system, which gets integrated with your motor as well as your, let's say, your power electronic circuit. And this can make anything electric. Yeah, you can actually what we call it as plug and drive. Yeah, so you take the system, you plug it onto your buses or trucks or whatever it may be, and it can actually work with any of the batteries, or it could be fuel cell based, etc. Yeah, so this is how we are actually trying to look at how we can actually take this conventional driveline layouts and trying to make it more electric with a plug and play approach, and you could just plug it and drive it. Now, similar to that, now if you look at e-trailers, for example, that is something that we are actually working on today. Now, what happens in an e-trailer is that what you've simply done is you've taken an electric motor and actually plugged it into the trailer. Yeah. Now, this trailer can go and attach itself to any one of the conventional tractors that you might have or the trucks that you might have. And typically, what happens is that these trailers, they try to reduce your fuel consumption of your the parent vehicle by about 16%. Yeah, because this particular motor has the intelligence to really look at the driving situations and try to figure out how we can really do that. Yeah, but yes, 2050 carbon neutral, huge challenges for the industry for sure. Yeah, but then we are there. We are working towards it. We are seeing how we can really do that and try to support our customers much better than that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's fair because we have already ships, planes, and many things which are not on the road being electrified. So that's interesting. But this conference being for the entrepreneurs. So Brian, looking at it from an entrepreneurship perspective, I know General Motors also does a lot of things with startups. There are some underlying technologies going further in our original plans, pre-pandemic plans, whether it's a connected vehicle or an autonomous vehicle. There was an interplay of IoT, M2M, artificial intelligence, machine learning, of course, computer vision, and many more things. 5G, of course, not to forget 5G. It's already a lot of companies are talking about launching 5G in the coming months, not years. So where do you see the play of these technologies, underlying technologies in the future of transport, and how do you connect to the opportunities for entrepreneurs globally? In other words, if you can also hint upon if there are some countries which will take off this first, obviously, in terms of autonomous vehicles or something, what could be your advice for entrepreneurs to plug these opportunities?
Okay, so look, a couple of things. Firstly, let's talk about autonomous vehicles, because I know that's what everyone wants to talk about. Lots and lots of companies are doing autonomous vehicles at the moment. And again, I don't need to restate what we're doing and what other companies are doing. I think everyone can see that. But what's coming out of it is, with like everything, it's a factor of economics. As more and more people are now rushing to get into autonomous of anything, doesn't matter what it is, the technology itself is becoming more and more available. The technology is becoming more and more affordable. Even something as simple as now the latest iPhone, right, has a small LiDAR system in the iPhone itself, the iPhone 12. So size, when people used to think they were this big, they're already down to this big, and they're affordable. What is interesting about that is, I think, instead of startup companies trying to compete against that, startup companies, if I'm an entrepreneur and I'm thinking about, where do I play? Well, play where others aren't. So I talk about, what is the value of people in the future? We keep asking, and I'll digress for a little bit. And when people say, what should I do in the future? What should be the job that I do in the future? My answer is very simple. Do what machines can't. Because if you try and compete against the machines, you're going to fail every single time. Well, the same thing is true in this particular area. There is areas where there's already a lot of technology going into it, a lot of money, a lot of big investments. But that's only one small element. As I mentioned, this idea of having small drones now starting to run around and deliver, whether it be pizzas, whether it be tins of baked beans, water, packages from Amazon, whether they're flying drones or movable drones or spider drones, all of those things are needing some level of artificial intelligence, because they're all communicating with each other and they're understanding what's the most efficient way. What I've been amazed at recently is I keep doing some research in this, and many of the folks that are probably watching today already know this, but there is so much available open source packages already available free of charge on the internet around machine learning ideas or camera-based systems, machine learning algorithms that are free for social networking between robots. You don't even have to invent it. It's all there. So for an entrepreneur that sees a small window that says, I would like to be in the future mobility space, but that doesn't mean I have to design a car. It means I might want to design a small widget that deals with a very specific case, and the technology's available and the open source networks are there so you can use it and share it. Those are the things that I would be looking at, because quite frankly, they're cheap. To go into big, high scale, autonomous vehicles or even electrification, there is a lot of money required to do that. And it's very hard to start from a zero base. So that's what my recommendation would be for anyone that's looking to find, where do I start? How do I get it? What would I look for? Look at what others aren't doing. and look at what machines can't do, and that's a good place to start.
I think makes perfect sense. And I think it's apt to say, which perhaps many people might realize already, is that a 10-year-old company has beaten a 130-year-old company. And we are talking about Tesla and BMW, for example, in terms of whatever has happened in the last 10 years. That only goes to tell what Brian just said, that I think the context of software, for example, or non-mechanical part of a car is close to 60, 70, maybe going towards 90%. And I think that sort of defines new opportunities for multiple technologies and entrepreneurs. I think from my perspective, if I add to what Brian said, it will be how well you understand the context for which you're building a solution. So quick question to Sridhar. If it is electric, is it a non-owned, so mobility as a service is what you think is going to be the future? So where you don't own stuff, and that's going to be.
If you probably asked me this question pre-corona, the answer would have been a definite yes. But then, like all of us know, the situation is very, very uncertain. We are still battling the virus. And if you really look at some of the responses that we really got per the surveys from McKinsey or, let's say some of the internal surveys that we have, even today, 80% of the respondents say that they probably do not want to really go for shared mobility as of now, citing health as one of the primary reasons for not really going for shared mobility. Yeah. If you look at the McKinsey report, the initial, the top priority was time to destination, for example. Yeah, and health was probably 8th or 9th in the pecking order. But now the health has become first, and probably the time to destination has become third. Yeah. So I guess we need to wait. We need to really look at how things are going to go forward. But again, shared mobility will bounce back, but it again depends on the business models that we really create, and we really look at how we can make this more healthy for a particular passenger to actually travel on it. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Thanks, Sridhar. Brian, slightly off engineering topic. I know you're VP engineering, so I would love to take this viewpoint from you. If we go the path of autonomous, which I get a sense that we're going anyway, there will be a situation where there is a heterogeneous mode, where non-autonomous and autonomous will exist together. And then on the other side of it, you have a new breed of opportunities, in my opinion, for folks from legal and ethics and that kind of domains, which are not directly never involved in an engineering making of a product. So what I mean by that, an empty autonomous car on its way to pick you up, meet with an accident, and whom should we hang now? So those kind of discussions have already been going on for a while now. So do you think there are opportunities for people who work in non-engineering domains to have a significant hand in this part of the future of transportation?
That's a very loaded question, that one there, Kaushik. So again, I'll give you my personal thoughts on this. Actually, if I stay away from the lawyers, I hope we're not springing a whole industry of new legal aspects because of autonomous, but I got a suspicion that we are. But I think if I put that aside, what is really interesting is the number of new types of jobs and skill sets that are already being generated. We are now investigating autonomous, and just that one aspect. How do you put a vehicle on a road and have it drive autonomously around and interact in the way in which you would expect it to interact? The self-driving car bit, turns out that's the really easy part. Geez, we could have done that years ago and had cars on the road. It's all the unknown factors, and the biggest unknown factor that's out on the roads is humans. And humans, as we all know, are the most unpredictable creatures that can ever live. And we do some of the most stupidest things that can be possibly imagined at times. So how do you deal with that? And as a result of that, there is new types of not just software, but surveillance systems. There's new types of communication systems. There's new types of interactions, audio systems, there's new types of visual systems. There's things, I'm not even talking about cars now, I'm just talking about in general. There's the whole industry now, as we talk about Industry 4.0, and you know, I always think, and I always sort of laugh about when I hear what people are talking about with Industry 4.0. You know, Industry 4.0 is nothing more than me tailoring, you know, to your needs, right? That's really what 4.0 is. So now when you've got autonomous and you're looking at 4.0 together, now you've got a situation where you can personalize a vehicle when you get into it to suit that person. You can change the color, you can change the radio, but you can change a lot more than that. You can change the way in which that vehicle will interact with its surroundings. If you want to go a certain route, or you like a certain scenery or a certain viewpoint, it'll change the direction accordingly. If they know that you've got a certain taste in clothing, or you know, there's something particularly you want to see, you were Googling something that morning, and I don't know, I'll make this up. You were Googling having a trip to Antarctica. Well, you're starting to drive now in an autonomous vehicle that's connected to other buildings, other areas, and you may start to see electronic billboards starting to change and be tailored to you because it knows you're coming, and it puts a big sign up that says, you know, if you want to go to Antarctica, call this number. It already knows that you're coming. That's Industry 4.0 working with autonomous. And that's all of the other industries now that are starting to grow very quickly around, in spite of even having the lawyers know things. So will there be offshoots of jobs associated with just the fact that we're now starting to talk about and starting to get into autonomous? The answer is yes. And I got no doubt that, you know, 10 years from now, we will have new jobs that none of us even thought about, even this right now today, that we thought we knew a whole bunch of things, but it'll be like, wow, I didn't see that one coming. So absolutely. And again, for me, I find that to be the most exciting part about this. You can see, I actually get very excited about this one.
No, I think we share that excitement, Brian, and thank you so much. I think we have run out of time. The organizers are actually asking us to wrap up this session. So I would really thank both Sridhar and Brian. But if you want to say anything in 10 seconds, please go ahead, Brian, first.
Okay, for me, it's very simple. If you've got a goal, go and work hard to make your goal achieve, and don't expect someone to give it to you for free.
Wonderful. That's a true spirit of entrepreneurship. I fully echo. Sridhar, any 10-second thought?
No closing comments really, but I think future is electric, and we work hard towards making it possible. And let's hope for a carbon neutral future. Thank you.
I think I would like to sign off by saying that I think climate, carbon, and safety will play on everybody's mind when we take decisions. So I think it was. I think we could have gone on easily for another hour with these two gentlemen and their expertise and wisdom, but we don't have time for that, unfortunately. So I thank Sridhar and Brian for your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sudhindra. And Brian, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. That was a great session. Thank you for all the insights. Good to know transport and the future of transport is only going to be climbing heights, and it's going nowhere else. Well, it's time for our next session. We'll be